Alright, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَنْ جَمَعَ بَيْنَ عَبْدٍ وَمُدَبَّرٍ. From there.
ومن جمع بين حر وعبد وشاة ذكية.
ومن جمع بين حر وعبد أو شاة ذكية وميتة بطل البيع فيهما. Okay, so now he's talking about another type of masla. Okay, this masla is basically if a person has bought two items in one receipt. So on the receipt, there's only one item on the receipt, as in one line written. But in that one line, there's two things that he's bought. Yeah, so two things he's bought for one price. You understand that? Yeah, so for example, like in the item it says, a hat and gloves. Hat and gloves equals £15. Yeah, hat and gloves equals £15. Two things, like in one item, not one item, there's more than one item, but on one item in the receipt. So that's one contract that is. So if a person, the rule is this, look, there's three scenarios. If a person combines two halal things, two permissible things in one contract, that contract goes through. You bought a hat and gloves, £15, that transaction is valid. Why? Because the items themselves are legal, yeah, they're lawful. Okay, number two, the second type of contract is where you have two things which are both haram. Does that transaction go through?
No.
Okay, that doesn't go through. Number three is you have one item which is permissible and one item which is impermissible. So this is of two types. The impermissible item might be something which is totally haram in Sharia, like alcohol or swine or a free person. So a person, for example, like buys a chocolate bar and buys some wine. Yeah, chocolate bar and wine together equals £20. Yeah, that's absolutely not allowed. Not allowed. Both items are not allowed. Not even the halal thing goes through. However, if the impermissible item is something which is not haram, but it's not allowed. Does that make sense? Remember we said something can be allowed, permissible, but it's not allowed to go through for some reason. So for example, like someone buys a chocolate bar and buys, let's say, a mudabbar, a slave whose master has promised him that he's going to let him set him free if something happens. Yeah, or for example, like you bought a chocolate bar and you bought a mobile phone that doesn't belong to the seller. This is the seller's mate's phone. He hasn't given him permission yet to sell it. And he's gone and said, right, you want to buy this phone and this chocolate bar, both put together £50. So in this scenario, the transaction in the permissible thing will only go through and the other thing will not go through. Does that make sense?
But I thought we said that if you can't separate the price, then
yeah, that's the original rule, as you're right. That's the original rule. But in this case, there's another rule as well, which is we try to make the Muslim's transaction as valid as possible. So because these two things have been sold, the second item is not haram to sell, but there's just a little technicality there. So in this case, we call this like an exemption. It's called istihsan.
Not haram, but permissible.
Yeah, so it's not allowed. It's not haram, but it's not permissible to sell.
how do you determine the price then? How do you divide?
So what they'll do is they'll work out on average the resale price of that thing.
So what do you mean that the second item goes through? How if the price is the same for both of them?
Yeah, so the price is the same.
£10 for the two.
2, yes, so it works out how much would one cost.
So they work out how
Yeah.
much the one customer gets a refund for the second item.
Yeah, so he wouldn't have to pay for the second item. If he did pay for it, he went to court. The courts would tell the seller to give him back his money for that one item which was not permissible, and he has to return the item. Now normally in scenario number 1, I told you scenario number 1, when two permissible things, gloves and a hat, you sold together, and you went to the shopkeeper and you said the seller, and you said to him, look, here I bought two of these, but I just want this one. But he wants to sell them together. Remember we said thawbain. That's not allowed, because there's no need to kind of separate each one. But in this, the one that we mentioned now, the item which is not haram but it's not permissible to sell, there's a need for a Muslim transaction to be validated. So it's out of necessity that they made it permissible. Yeah, so look at this. Man jama'a bayna hurrin, whoever combines between a free person and abd. So abd is the item which is sellable, and hur is a thing which is not sellable. Or shatin dhakiyatin wa mayta, or he wants to buy a meat, like we're going to the butcher's, yeah, and the butcher's is selling HMC chicken, and next to HMC he's also selling haram chicken, and the person buys both of them. Yeah, he buys both of them. Let's say he's got a shop and he wants to sell in his restaurant people who don't want halal meat, so he buys both. So you're not allowed to buy that as a Muslim. So because you're not allowed to buy it, the transaction absolutely is not allowed. Yeah, even the permissible thing doesn't go through. So he'd have to repeat the contract again with the permissible item, the HMC chicken. You understand that?
But in the first example, the free person and the slave, doesn't that fall within the permissible, the
No.
second example?
You can't sell a free person, can you? Absolutely, at all. There's no way you can sell him.
Yes.
So okay, batal al-bay' fihima. So the transaction is nullified in both items. وَمَنْ جَمَعَ بَيْنَ عَبْدٍ وَمُدَبَّرٍ. However, if someone combines between a abd, a slave, and between a mudabbar, we mentioned what mudabbar was, or بَيْنَ عَبْدِهِ, his own slave, so the seller is selling his own slave and the slave of someone else without their permission, what's going to happen? صَحَّ الْبَيْء فِي الْعَبْدِ بِحِصَّتِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَنِ. The transaction will go through with regards to his own slave according to its value. Now he hasn't mentioned a separate value for each one. If he had mentioned a separate value in any of these scenarios, like he said the HMC chicken is for £3, and the non-HMC chicken, the haram chicken, let's say, is for whatever, £3, yeah, or £2, whatever, then that would go through anyway, because you've got two items on the receipt. We're talking about combination. So صح البيع, the transaction is valid بحصته, regarding its individual price. Yeah,
So,
بالثمن. Yeah.
Just say if you're buying something for non-Muslims, or just say if it's a cake or something that's not halal, can you buy that?
Technically, you're not allowed to. Yeah, you're not allowed to buy something haram.
Even though it's not for
Even
consuming by yourself.
yeah, because there's a rule in fiqh which is that thing which you're not allowed to buy for consume yourself, you're not allowed to buy it for someone else or give it to someone else,
Even though they're non-Muslims.
even non-Muslims. Yeah, this is according to there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "Look, I sell alcohol. Is that okay?" The Prophet said, "The one who made its drinking haram has made it selling haram." Yeah. So if selling is haram, therefore buying is haram. Whoever you're buying it for. And it's very important to remember that look, as a Muslim, you need to have your morals and laws, principles clear. Other people should know these what you believe in. Just like some people who are vegans, they don't want to touch meat, and they say, "Look, I apologize, but look, I can't eat anything," and we respect them. We don't start going around corners saying, "Hey, look at them, hey, dirty. You don't eat meat." No, we respect them. We have respect for them. Look, they've got principles. So we shouldn't feel in front of non-Muslims that say to them, "Look, I'm sorry. According to what I believe, I'm not allowed to sell this." That's fine. Should be okay with that. Yeah, so that's why we don't have to buy alcohol. There's also always other things that we can buy for them. The issue where there is a problem, for example, like where you're in a situation where you're a foster parent and you've got to take care of foster children, and you don't really have a choice of who you choose. They just give you, and then they're Christians, and if they want bacon, you got to make bacon for them. What do you do? Or if you're non-Muslim and you accepted Islam, and you've got like children, family members who are non-Muslim still, and they want you to buy things for them. So that's a situation where you can look into that masala. But just generally buying it for a friend, no need for it. Okay. Next. Everyone understand that? So this is the rule regarding combination. Combining two things, two or more things. You buy lots of things, one thing in there is haram, then if it's haram totally, the whole transaction is invalid. But if the thing in there is not haram, but it's just not permissible to sell, then the transaction in the other items will be valid, and in that particular thing, it won't be valid. Does that make sense? Maybe this can make sense maybe in something like, in shares as well. Where you have shares. So, for example, like this is where you buy shares in a company, and in that company has an element of alcohol in there. Like you got shares in Asda, they sell alcohol. So what happens in there then? So you can automatically assume that your share is in part of the non-alcohol business of it. That your profits are going to come out of the non-alcohol part of the business. Okay. Right, next. Now, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were certain contracts, there were certain sort of transactions that would take place which were considered to be impermissible. And a lot of these contracts were either because there's lots of risk in there, there's lots of uncertainty in there, there's elements of interest in there, there's some sort of deception in there as well, or even forcing someone to buy something they don't want. So because of these things, transactions become impermissible. So uncertainty, there's risk, high risk, there's interest, elements of interest, there's forcing someone to buy something they don't want, and okay. So what are these then? Number one of these was like this. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, auctioning was allowed. He permitted auctioning. It's allowed. So basically when you're selling, let's say I want to sell this cup, and I said, who wants to buy this cup? And Arib says, I want to buy it. Now that's not a qabul. That's not a qabul. Because what I've said, I haven't spoken to him only, I've said, who wants to buy it? So I've done the offer, I made the offer, and he says, I want to buy it. And then I say, is there anyone else? And then let's say Brother Ikram says, I want to buy it. And then someone says, is there anyone else? So the final person that I agree to, that's where the contract is made. However, if I'm selling this cup and it's not selling above £10, what I do is I text my friend and say, quickly come over here and say that you want to buy this for £20. That's najish. Getting your friend to come and raise the bid, which people do on eBay and some places. That's not allowed. There's deception. So you can have like a certain reserved value where you say, right, if it doesn't reach this value, I'm not going to sell it. That's fine. But if you want to bid, you can't deceive people. So by bringing a third person in who is manipulating the bidding, that's not allowed. Just like they have these kind of, I don't know in auctions here if they have that.
It's against the law.
Against the law. So these are the kind of, this is the reason why, be very careful. I know some people do this, say, look, but if I get sold, then I'm going to lose out. But why did you put it on bid in the first place? Don't put it on bid, have a fixed price, and let people buy it off you. Okay, so Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he prohibited najish. This is najish, third person manipulating the contract. Okay, number 2 is this. Let's say, for example, like I go to a car boot sale, right, and I pick up this cup, and I say to you, I say, how much is this for? Right, and he says, £5. I say, I'll give you £4 for it. What's this called? Bargaining, yeah? Negotiation. Bargaining. So bargaining, negotiation is allowed in Islam. Nothing wrong with it. Okay? However, what is not allowed is, let's say for example, I bargain with you. Yeah, in Arabic this is called musawama, so. Yeah, so. And you say, okay, that's fine. So we're bargaining. You've agreed a price that I've said. So if I say £3.50, you say, okay, that's fine. Then another person comes in and says, don't sell it to him, sell it to me and I'll give you £5 for it. Yeah. So what has he done? He's kind of breaking the contract. So this is not allowed. The Prophet ﷺ, he forbade this kind of transaction. Simply because this is a form of, it causes a bit of enmity between people. Some people will do this. You'll be selling your car, you'll make an offer to someone, it's all agreed, everything's done, and then the promise is made. You haven't done the contract, ijab and qabul is not done fully, but you just made the promise. And then another guy phones you, say, you know what, just forget it, just don't tell that guy, say you don't want to sell it, and sell it to me for this much. Yeah, that's not allowed. Does that make sense? And the Prophet ﷺ, he also said this hadith, it was also said regarding proposals as well. So let's say there's a woman who's getting married, and a man, they've been having meetings, and eventually they've decided to go through with it. Yeah. So the ceremony hasn't happened, but everything else is done. And then someone else comes and break it off with him, and marry me, and I'll give you all this. Yeah. The Prophet ﷺ said this is wrong.
So selling the items regardless of whether the other offer is higher.
Yeah, because everything's been done. The only thing left now is just a formal contract. And now the reason this is wrong simply is because morally it's wrong. Yeah, it's just a wrong thing to do. Yeah, if you didn't get that thing, it's fine. You didn't get it. It's in your taqdeer, right? But to go and try to cheat that person and try to, take advantage of them, that's wrong. So the Prophet ﷺ naha and is sawmi with the sin, okay, not sawm with the sad. Sawm with the sad is fasting. Sawm with the sin. And is sawmi ala sawmi akhihi, ghayrihi. Yeah, so making a bargain over the bargain of someone else. If, however, the guy has not agreed, let's say for example, I'm saying to you, take for £3.50, I'll buy it for £3.50, I'll buy it. And you still haven't agreed anything, and someone else comes and say, look, I'll buy it £5. And you accept his, it's fine. Because there wasn't any sort of resolve. Can you just open that, please?
So, if you say to somebody, I promise I'm going to sell this thing to you.
Yeah.
And then something happens, is he haram for not going ahead with that? Even when
You see, legally you can't take him to court, that's the thing.
Mm.
You can't take him to court legally for that. If he breaks a promise, even if he signs a promise, I'll promise you, you can't take him to court. Yeah, the judge will just say, look, it was a promise and it wasn't anything binding. But in the eyes of Allah, what you done was wrong. What that person done was wrong. So the contract with the other person will go through, the item will be halal for them, but it's just you committed a sin. Just like if you backbite, committed a sin. Or just like if you swore, you commit a sin. Or just if you lied, you commit a sin. So it won't affect the contract itself.
So in the second one, you are allowed to break the contract, but obviously it's sinful.
Yeah, I mean, legally, yes. If you want to put it that way, legally, you won't be held responsible legally for breaking the contract. But in the eyes of Allah, you will be held responsible on the Day of Judgment. So sometimes what happens is, legally something is wrong, but in the eyes of Allah, legally something is right, is allowed. But in the eyes of Allah, it's wrong. Just like sometimes you say, look, morally it's wrong. Someone say, but it's not haram, is it? Yeah, but morally it's wrong, what you're doing is wrong. So they'll kind of say that. Okay, next. The next thing is this. Another thing which the Sharia doesn't permit is when a person is going to take advantage of vulnerability. So one way of taking advantage of vulnerability is that you monopolize. So what some people used to do in the past was this. The farmers that used to come from outside, they would go all the way out, they would meet all the farmers and say to the farmers, look, sell me the item, sell it to me. So they'd sell it to them, and then they would take all of that item and store it in a warehouse somewhere. So no one else had it, only they had it. And then they would sell it to the people at whatever price they wanted. Yeah, even if it was extortion rates. Does that make sense? So this is not allowed if it's going to be something which affects the, the population. And it's usually to do with those things that they need regularly, like their food, flour, rice, the things, staple diet. Yeah. So if someone goes and buys all the flour or all the rice and stores it away, and you know there's no other shop you can get it from except for this guy, he can put the price as high as he wants. So again, legally, the courts won't say anything to him. Say, look, you're just selling, you sell it as much as you like. But in the eyes of Allah, he's committing a big sin.
So, Ustad, is the taking advantage the issue?
Yeah, taking
So
advantage.
if he was to just buy it from them but still sell it at a reasonable
That's
price,
fine.
then it's fine.
Because it's not harming anyone. Yeah.
So to do when you're bargaining with someone with rather price asking, he's asking for 10 rupee and you're giving 5.
Yeah.
Is it allowed for the for the traders to bump up the price 4 times higher, charge somebody 3 times more than another person who's paid?
No, it's fine.
That is fine.
Because every transaction is between the seller and the buyer.
Even though you know that the market price for this particular
That's
item
fine.
should be 10.
That's fine.
Somebody gets 40 for it.
That's fine. So, I mean, see, legally it's allowed. But if it's morally wrong, that's something else. If there's like a poor person and you know they're starving and you're still deliberately selling them for a very high rate, then morally that's wrong there is. But the transaction will go through. Make sense? Okay. So this is called talaqqi al-jalab. Talaqqi means to meet, jalab means to gather. So you're meeting all the people, or talaqqi means to receive and gather. So you're receiving it all, gathering it all in the markets, in the warehouse. Okay, next. The other type of transaction the Prophet ﷺ he forbade was this. The market should be a free place for people to buy and sell. And a very healthy sign of a market is competition. So competition is something very good. Yeah, and allowing competition is also something which is good. Because what competition does, it automatically allows people to sell at rates which are going to be low. Because the more people you have, competition you have, the lower the rates are going to be. And the less competition you have, the more you can put the rates up. Yeah. So this was something they used to do in the olden days. What they used to do was they used to go to the farmers, and the farmers normally came to the city centre. They set up their stalls and they'd sell whatever product they came with. So they could sell it at whatever price they thought was good for them. And usually it'd be cheap. But some of the businessmen, what they used to do is go to all the farmers, buy it from them, so the prices would be fixed. And so this would then, 2 problems would come here. Number 1, the farmers wouldn't be getting their full money. Yeah, because they might come to the city and make more money. And number 2 is that it will stop competition. And when competition stops, then it results in the same thing we said earlier on, monopoly. Everyone got that?
So this is similar to the last one,
Yeah.
the talaqqi
al-jalab.
jalabi, but this is rather than just meeting them halfway along the way, you positively go to them and buy up all their stock.
That's it. Okay, so وعن بيع الحاضر للبادي. So بيع الحاضر للبادي. So the hadir, resident of the city, he sells for the farmers, for the people living in the countryside. Okay, another type of transaction which when Islam came, Islam forbade was selling when the azan of Jummah takes place. So when the azan of Jummah, this is specifically for the azan of Jummah, okay, no other salat. So when the adhan for Salatul Jummah takes place, what we call the first azan. Yeah, when the adhan takes place, let's say for example the first azan is at 12:30. Soon as the adhan is made and is heard outside, all the businesses should stop. Why? Because Allah says in the Quran, hasten towards the remembrance of Allah. فَاسْأَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. So if you continue buying and selling, you're not preparing for Jummah. So any transactions made after the adhan up to the salat are considered to be makruh.
So, you like working?
Yes, so now the question comes now, what if someone is on the way to Jummah but buying and selling from someone on the bus? Yeah, he's got his stuff, he's on the bus, he's going towards Jummah and he's buying and selling. Is that stopping him from going to Jummah? Should that be allowed? Yes, allowed. Because the aim is anything that stops you from going to Jummah. The second issue here is, what about those people who have jobs where obviously they can't get time? So for this, either the solution is that they go at their break time. Yeah, so whenever they have break, that's when they do their Jummah. So it's like they're not restricted to that masjid. Or, they actually, second option or possibility here is that because of the necessity that they have, their job requires them to keep working. So maybe it's a doctor and he's doing surgery, yeah, and he's getting paid for that surgery, and that surgery is going into Jummah time, even after the azan is given. If he stops, it's going to harm the person. Yeah, so in that case, you look at the situation. So generally, when people are working and their bosses don't give time off, right, then they're like excluded from that. Does that make sense? But they should try and make some sort of provision for themselves so that they can pray some Jummah somewhere else. Like some people do at 4 o'clock in summer. They have a 3:30 Jummah, the 4 o'clock Jummah. So والبيع in the adhan al-Jummah. وكل ذلك يكره. All of that is makruh. Yeah, all of that is makruh. What do you mean by makruh? It means, yeah, this is extremely disliked. Yeah, and these things will render a transaction fasid. Fasid. So when we say a fasid, it goes through, but it's something that should be broken. وَلَا يَفْسُدْ بِهِ الْبَيْء. However, the transaction does not become nullified by it. Yeah, لَا يَفْسُدْ بِهِ الْبَيْء. So the bay does not, they go through, but it's something which is extremely disliked.
Ustad, buying and selling during other salahs, even not at adhan time, is that alright?
That's fine. Other salah, because the Quran clearly mentions only about Jummah. إِذَا نُودِيَ لِلصَّلَاةِ مِنْ يَوْمِ الْجُمْعَةِ. When the announcement is made for the day of Jummah, فَاسْعَوْا إِلَىٰ وَذَرُوا الْبَيْء. Allah says, وَذَرُوا, leave transaction. Clearly says leave transaction. Okay, so these are transactions which are not allowed, but if you did them, what would happen? They go through. Okay, next. Now this is another ethical kind of moral kind of issue. Yeah, and that is that, let's say for example, let's say there is, for example, in the olden days when they used to have slaves. If you have two slaves and those two slaves are minors and they both relate to each other, closely related, you're not allowed to separate them. Why is that? Yeah, you can break a family. They're already alone, two young children. Or, yeah, can you just get that? Ya Allah, la ilaha illa ant. Okay, yeah. So look at this. So if you have two slaves, they're both minors and they both relate to each other, close relatives, you can't separate them. Once they reach the age of puberty and they become adults, now you can separate them. Why is that? Because separating them at that time is going to hurt them. Yeah, it's going to have an effect on them. So this actually happened with Ali radiallahu anhu. He had two slaves, minors, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him, how are your two slaves? And he said, oh, I sold one of them. He goes, no, bring it back. Go to that guy who sold to bring it back. Yeah, and he said, whoever separates between two people in the dunya, Allah will separate between them and their loved ones on the Day of Judgment. So you see how much the Sharia looks at, trying to look at the morals and ethics of a transaction as well. It's not just about you making money, it's about other things as well in society. And if you look at nowadays, for example, like usurping the resources, yeah, of poor countries, yeah, taking advantage of them and doing all these things. So even though they're making money, technically it's not good what they're doing. Yeah, it's not a good thing to do. So من ملك مملوكين صغيرين, whoever owns two minor slaves. أحدهما ذو رحم محرم. One of them is a ذو رحم محرم. Look at this now. What does a ذو رحم محرم mean? It's going to come a few times later on in Qudoori. ذو رحم means they come from the same womb. We all come from the same womb, don't we? Whose womb do we come from? Yeah, Hawa. So we all come from Hawa, yeah? But then, obviously, I come from my grandparents. You guys don't share that with me? Yeah. So, Dhu Rahim means we share the same womb. And Mahram means that we are legally, we're not allowed to marry each other. So, for example, like brothers and sisters, they are Dhu Rahims because they come from the same womb. Are they allowed to marry each other? No. So they are Mahram as well. But cousins, they come from the same womb. Okay? Like the greater womb, great grandparents, whatever. But they can't marry each other. They're not Mahrams.
Both conditions have to
Both
be
conditions have to be met.
Sorry, an example you gave with Ali radiallahu anhu, Prophet told him to go and get the slave back. But the person who bought the slave wasn't obliged to give the slave back, was he? Because the transaction is valid.
The Prophet he told to break it.
Right.
Yeah, told to break it. Okay. And in one narration it's also mentioned that anyone who separates between two people, Allah's curse is upon them as well. So when it comes to these kind of things, there's scope for the judge to separate, to break a transaction. And the Prophet ﷺ is the judge. So, أحدهما ذو رحم محرم. One of them is the ذو رحم محرم of the other one. من الآخر. لم يفرق بينهما. The owner should not separate between them. وكذلك إذا كان أحدهما كبيرا. And likewise, when one of them is kabir, والآخر صغيرا. They're both related. Mother and daughter. Father and son. Uncle and niece, nephew. Yeah, auntie and niece, like that. Yeah, so ذو رحم محرم. Yeah, and they're both related to each other. So you shouldn't separate with why? It's going to hurt them again. Yeah, you separate a child, take it to another family alone. فَإِنْ فَرَّقَ بَيْنَمَا كُرِهَ ذَلِكَ. If he does do this, this is makruh. However, will the transaction go through? Yes, it will go through. And in this case, they should try to break the transaction. You know, like we said, البيع الفاسد. You can actually go and break the transaction without having to do اقالة, which is going to come next. Does that make sense? Okay, وَإِنْ كَانَ كَبِيرَيْنِ. What if they're both adults? So one's 20 years old, one's 25 years old. Can they separate them? Yeah. فَلَا بَأْسَ. بأس is the ism of لا نفي الجنسية. لا بأس بالتفريق بينهما. So بالتفريق جار مجرور متعلق to ثابت. And بينهما مضاف مضاف إليه becomes the ظرف. Everyone understand that? Okay, that's the end of بيع الفاسد.
So depends on the Qudoori.
Yeah.
If they're both adult brothers, they still love one.
Yeah. But because they're young, they're not young, or one of them is not young, it doesn't apply. You can separate. Yeah. And so this is even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, two sisters were gifted to the Prophet ﷺ by the king of Egypt, Muqawqas. Yeah, and he separated them. He gave them to other people. So because they're adults, it's fine. Okay, next. Okay, the next topic. So after we've done Bay al-Fasid, how transactions become nullified or actually transactions don't go through. Now we're going to be talking about the iqala. Now we said this, after an ijab, after an offer, and after an acceptance has been made, that transaction now becomes binding. So long as there's nothing there external there which can affect this. What kind of external things can stop this from happening? For example, like khiyar al-shart. If a person takes khiyar al-shart, he's got 3 days to make his mind up. That can nullify or stop the transaction from going ahead completion. Or if he finds a fault in the item, he can give it back. Yeah. Or if he hasn't seen the item and he sees it for the first time, yeah, and he's not happy with it, he can give it back. Yeah. Or like we said, if the transaction is a fasid transaction, they can nullify it without any excuse. without any reason. Now, the fifth form is iqala. So this is a legal way of nullifying a contract. It's called iqala. So, aqala yuqilu iqalatan. Yeah, aqala yuqilu iqalatan. It means to like uplift something, to uplift a fault, to remove a fault. Yeah. Okay, so this iqala, this is something which the Prophet ﷺ has promoted. He's encouraged the Sahaba to do, because sometimes what happens is you buy something and you don't really like it, and now you want to give it back. So it's a sign, it's a good kind of a goodwill gesture, you can say. Yeah, it's something which is like, it creates confidence between buyer and seller as well. Like if you're a shop and your customers know that you'll accept it, you take something back, I'm not happy with this, can I give it back? They got no reason to give it back, and you accept, you say it's fine, yeah, here's the money, that's fine. Then what is this? This creates trust and confidence between the buyer and the seller. However, like we said before, if however something has been added into it, yeah, if they've added a fault in there, right, or they've added something else, stitching in there, or some of their own wealth in there, can they give it back? No, they can't give it back.
So is that like what we have in most shops now, is like 28 days? If you're not
Money
fully-
back guarantee, yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine.
so that would fall on this.
That would fall in this. Yeah, but that would also possibly come under khiyar shart as well. Yeah, you test it out, you're not happy with it, give it back. But this was, there's nothing wrong with it, right? And it's just that maybe after a year, after 2 years, you go to the guy, look, I'm sorry, I bought this, can I give it back? And that's fine, take it back. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever does this to a customer, then on the day of judgment, Allah will remove his sins from him. And just as you treat Allah's servants in this dunya, Allah is going to deal with you like that in the day of judgment. This is a high reward for this. And shopkeepers, this is a very hard thing for a businessman to do, a trader. Yeah, someone like for me and you who are not traders, we think, mashallah, I would do this if I was a businessman. I'll deal with every customer. And you won't. Because when you're in that position, then every penny that you make from someone, it's very difficult for you to give it back. Yeah, that's how it works. So anyway, look, there's conditions for this though. So first of all, is iqala permissible? Yes, so al-iqalatu jaizatun, iqala is jaiz. Yeah, permissible. Fil bay'i, in the transaction, in any transaction you do. For who is it permissible? Lil bayi' wal mushtari. Huh? How is that? We understand it's permissible if the customer wants it. That makes sense, innit? But why would the seller want it? Why would the seller want to nullify the contract?
He saw someone, then afterwards changed his mind like that.
Yeah, maybe he sold something and he made a big mistake, and he realized, you know what, he wanted to keep this. Might be a family loom, heirloom, yeah, something which was in their family. And
What if
then,
his motives are a bit more greedy?
I mean, that's
He
up to
says
the-
prices have gone up. So
that's
if I
up
get
to the
this
other guy.
back, I'll sell it.
he's not obliged to sell it.
Mm.
He's not obliged to.
Mm.
Just something good for him. Yeah, so it's permissible for the seller and for the who? For the buyer as well. Both of them, whichever one asks for it, and the other person agrees, then it's fine.
And what's the kind of limit of?
There's no limit. There are conditions though. Okay, so what are the conditions? It has to be returned on the original price. Where it was bought for, original price, no more. Yeah. فَإِنْ شَرَطَ أَكْثَرَ, if he, the guy who accepts the iqala, i.e. the seller, so the mushtari, the customer comes to the seller and says, can I give this back please? The seller cannot say to the guy, I want this extra thing with it as well. Yeah? Or the customer the seller goes to the customer and says, you know what, I saw this laptop, can I have it back? I really need it. Yeah, and then he goes, okay, I'll give you back, but I want £50 on top.
What if they do a new sale, like the guy sells the one that bought it? So
Yeah, that's
sells
fine.
it back.
If they want to do that, that's fine. But see, what we want to know is if it goes to court a month or 2 months or 10 months down the line, what will the judge count this transaction as? This exchanging of items, what will it be counted as? Will it be counted as a nullification of transaction? Or will it be counted as a new transaction? And each one has different implications. Does that make sense? So he says, in sharata akthara minhu. If he, the guy who is going to accept the iqala, if he says, I'll accept it on the condition where I get more in return, or aqal, or less. Yeah. So, or less meaning the guy comes to the seller and says, look, please, can I give it back? And the seller goes, okay, but I'm going to give you less money. Yeah, I'm going to give you full amount. I'm going to take some off. I'm going to cut some off. Then it won't be counted as iqala. In that case, it'll be counted as a new transaction. Does that make sense? Yeah. فَالشَّرْطُ بَاطِلٌ. Shartu batil means this condition is not allowed. Yeah. And if it does go through, it won't go through as iqala, it'll go through as a new transaction. Okay. وَيُرَدُّ, and the item will be exchanged, returned, بِمِثْلِ الثَّمَنِ الْأَوَّلِ, with a similar initial price. Whatever the initial price was, so the similar amount. So let's say it was for £10, he gives £10 back. Okay, now, see, now here is where you need to understand this a bit now. Okay, 5 minutes left. So look, imagine in every contract you have, there's always 3 people in every contract. Who are 3 people? There's the seller, there's the buyer, and there's always the public, third person. Yeah? So every time you make a transaction, so if I go to the shop and I buy something from the shopkeeper, right? This exchange of items, legally, what does it fall under? Trade, yeah? Contract. For me, it's a contract. For him, it's a contract. And for public, it's what? It's a contract, isn't it? Yeah? However, when it comes to iqala, in iqala, when me and you do iqala, for me it's iqala, for you it's iqala, but for the public, when they see exchange of items, what do they count it as? A transaction. For them it's a transaction. Now, how does this work then? So, okay. So the way this works is like this. Look, you're not going to understand it except if I explain to you one masala. Yeah, the only way I found is one masala explains all this. But you need to understand how this masala works. So look, let's say for example I have a house. This is my house. Yeah? And Siraj is my next door neighbor. If I want to sell my house, Islamically, I have to go to Siraj and ask Siraj, do you want to buy my house? I have to ask my closest neighbor, do you want to buy my house? If he says yes, I sell it to him. Yeah, whatever price I want. If he says no, then I can go and sell it to other people now. Yeah, so you have to sell it, ask your close neighbor. This is called shufa. Shufa. If I was to go directly and sell it to a third person without asking him, and he finds out even a year later, he can actually go to the courts and he can request for that transaction to be nullified, and I would have to sell it to him for the same price I sold it to that guy. So this is called shufa. Does that make sense? Everyone understand that masla? Okay, look how this works now. I got a house here. I went to Siraj, says, Siraj, you want to buy this house? He goes, no, I don't want it. You sure? He goes, yeah, I don't want it. Okay, I'm going to sell it to someone else. He goes, fine. So I went to Imtiaz, said to Imtiaz, you want to buy this house? He says, fine. He bought this house for, let's say, 150,000. He's bought the house. About a month or 2 months later, Imtiaz comes back to me and says, you know what, can I give you the house back? I'm sorry, it's been a big mistake about this. I wanted to buy a house, but now it's all plans have changed now. Yeah. So I go, it's fine, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'll return the money and we'll go all the deeds changed. So what happens? I give him all the money back. He gives me the house back. Now you see, what's happening here? Iqala between me and you is iqala, isn't it? But for him, it's a new trade. So what's going to happen now?
He's got to
He's got to go to him and ask him, can I give this back to him? If he says, I know, I want it, then he's got to go and say it to him. See that? Yeah, because so in Sharia, what you look for is, you don't look for names, you look for the concept. What is the underlying concept? That's how you like frame a masala. It's based on concepts. So you need to understand how the concept works. Like if you call a pig a cow, even if you call a pig a cow 100 times, it's still a pig. Yeah. So just by changing the name, it doesn't change something else. And if you call a cow a pig, even if you call it 100 times, it's still a cow, still halal. Yeah. So in here, because there's exchange of item, then that third person, for him, this is considered to be like a new contract. But for me and you, in legal terms, for me and you, it'd be considered to be nullifying. Yeah. So for example, if there was some sort of legal kind of tax, some legal kind of fee that you had to be paid whenever a transaction of buying or selling a house would be made, because we're nullifying it, we're not doing a new transaction. So what would happen?
It wouldn't apply.
Yeah, it wouldn't apply then.
Would you actually ask, in the sense of the public, just, say, giving it back to him, is anybody interested, or how does that work?
Just a neighbour.
Neighbor.
I know, the neighbour's giving it back now,
Yeah.
and he has to inform the public, the third person.
Yeah.
No,
Because he's living here, isn't he? He's living here.
Tell the same neighbor again.
Who's the neighbor? Remember, he's living here. The house, you can't move the house. The house is the same.
The house, I'm saying,
Siraj was the neighbour, he was in the public.
He's not. He's a neighbor. He's public, but he's the neighbor, isn't he? If he wasn't my neighbor, I wouldn't even have to ask him.
oh, I see, basically, it's the same person,
Yeah.
the buyer and the public.
So this masla, it only occurs in buying and
The
selling.
only I found it is in iqala, in shufa, nothing else.
I mean, it caused a lot of problem in places like Pakistan, when somebody moved in, never told his neighbour, and then.
I don't think they consider this rule there.
I didn't realise it was Sharia, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They have in Pakistan shufa
Do they have it?
involving, but only family members, so
Oh.
the bloodline.
Okay.
So before you can sell land,
You have to ask
it's
Yeah.
to a third party. You have to sell to your cousins and
Mm.
give them the option to keep it within the same,
Okay.
the same.
Yeah,
line.
and there's a whole chapter that's going to come regarding this.
Yeah.
But there's lots of benefits for it, because you have to remember, Islam tries to keep, the environment, yeah, the neighbors, keep them happy as well. Because every time a new person is going to come to your area, you're always worried, who is it going to be? Yeah, is it going to be some antisocial person? Okay, so look at this. وَهِيَ فَسْخٌ, and it, meaning iqala, is a fasakh, is a nullification, في حق المتعاقدين, with regards to the two people. بيع جديد, however, it's a new transaction في حق غيرهما, to other than them two, meaning the public. في قول أبي حنيفة, this is according to Imam Hanifa. Sahibain disagree with this. Okay. وَهَلَاكُ, now look at this now. Let's say, for example, us two, me the seller, you the buyer, we decide to do iqala. But what's happened is, the item we're doing iqala, unless it's a laptop, it's broken. Yeah. So when you took it, it's smashed on the floor. Now when you want to give this back, can you do iqala? So he says, وَهَلَاكُ الثَّمَنِ لَا يَمْنَعْ صِحَّةَ الْإِقَالَةِ. If the money gets destroyed, the money that I gave you, those notes with the serial number on them, if they are used up or they get lost or whatever, that does not affect the iqala, because you can use some other money in place of it. But the item itself, if that gets destroyed, وَهَلَاكُ الْمَبِيء يَمْنَعُ, it stops the validity of iqala. Iqala cannot go through if the item is destroyed or damaged beyond repair. However, if it's damaged slightly, then what? In halaka ba'dul mabi, if part of it's damaged, let's say for example, one of the keyboard keys has come off. Yeah. Jazat al-iqala, iqala is jaiz fi baqihi, in the remainder. So it will affect the amount of money you give back. So if that key is worth, let's say, 1% of its price, 1% of the price goes down.
And they can agree a price between themselves?
Yeah, whatever that's worth, it drops, it's reduced.
So, if I know this, is that do both parties have to agree, or is there a choice?
Yeah, both parties. You remember, you can never be forced to transfer ownership or something.
Okay, so it's not a right as such.
No, it's not. No, it's just like an extra, goodwill gesture.
The beginning one, you say you give 3 days.
As far as the concept is concerned, iqala in and of itself isn't another transaction.
No,
is it?
it's not.
And you're not writing any
No, no.
contract. So
It's just like a mechanism to nullify. Like I said, there's 5 things that where a contract can be stopped, and this is like one of them, nullification. Any other question?